Hello everyone and welcome back to Age of Nagash, which is a channel dedicated to Age of Sigmar. And in this video I'm very happy to give you my Why Play Blisterskin video, which is of course one of the sub-allegiances for the FleshEATER Courts. What I would like to also say in this video is this is my first video of doing a Why Play about a sub-allegiance, which is very different to the normal Y plays I do, because those Y plays are about whole allegiances, such as Uruk war clans can be broken down to the Big Warga. You've got the Iron Jaws of the Bone Splitters. Legions of Nagash can be broken down to all the different legions, and here in FleshEATER Courts it can be broken down to many of the Grand Courts. At the moment we have 4. So my idea of this video is that it may go on for a little bit shorter compared to some of the other Y plays, but really it just depends how much there is to talk about. The reason I think it can be a bit shorter is because we're not talking about a whole allegiance here, just a small part of it and more sort of play style. However, it is important to state that within all these sub-allegiances of all these different armies, it can completely change up how the army plays. And the Blisterskin is actually, I'm quite happy it won the poll I put up a little while ago to see what would be my first sub-allegiance one, because Blisterskin is something I've run a few times and I am quite a big fan of. So I'm quite excited to get into this. And just before we do, I want to give a shout out to my Patreon. So it's going to be my Morgasts, so Sandback, my Vampires, which is Amir, Martin S, Rouse321, Max T, David A, and my Necromancers, which is Jacq.l, RadiationRiley, AW77, Sagas, WolfNick. So thank you guys for all your continued support and allow me to continue my YouTube channel. So stay awesome and on with the video. So the first thing I want to talk about when I usually do my Y plays is of course the lore. And if you want to know more in-depth lore about FleshEATER Courts, please check out my many lore videos done for them. And also, you know, if you want a little summary, the lore video I did for them in the Why Play FleshEATER Courts. But essentially, who are the FleshEATER Courts? They are kingdoms of great heraldry who have many heroic warriors and knights who go to crusade the land, to purify it from any taint of evil and bring in joy, happiness and beyond all else, peace to the mortal realms. Or so they think, when in fact they are actually insane cannibals who believe they're doing all this good, but really they're going around and eating the mortal realms, I think is a better way to describe it. And I don't mean eating as, oh, they're eating the land. No, they're eating the inhabitants. So be it beast or man, they will eat you alive. Very few victims of the FleshEATER Courts are, shall we say, lucky enough to receive a quick death before they become food for all the court. And of course it is an honour to be chosen to go to the feast of a grand court such as the Blisterskin, but bear in mind, if you do go, you're more than likely what's on offer for supper, shall we say. But who are the FleshEATER Courts and where do they come from, I can hear you ask, potentially. So the Carrion King is essentially the first flesh eater, if you like. He was a vampire who essentially annoyed Nagash. Nagash doesn't really take kindly to annoyance, and being Age of Nagash here, I can understand his point of view, completely agree. So what he did is essentially imprisoned him, made him go mad, and then essentially when Age of Sigmar happened, the Stormcasts ascended down from Azir. They assaulted one of Nagash's many prisons. This one happened to contain the Carrion King, and he essentially broke out during all this mayhem, and his madness that he developed within himself, and you know, we can see how we haven't got a model for the Carrion King, but if we look at a model for an Abhorrent Archregent or an Abhorrent Ghoul King, you can see that sort of Strigoi style of a monstrous vampire. And essentially he spread this madness wherever he went. It was infectious, and spread it to other vampires and other creatures, and then these other vampires who then go mad and turn into Abhorrent Ghoul Kings, etc. Then find ruined civilizations and look upon the people there who are in desperate need of support, shall we say, and takes pity on them and gives them that support that he believes they need, or actually then those poor souls who thought they were in a desperate position have now found out that they are out of the frying pan and into the fire, but through their delusion they live in the happiness of ignorance, shall we say, and then they become all mutated and corrupt. And essentially that is how a Grand Court of the Flesh Eaters is born. In a very quick summary. Again, if you want more details about the lore on this, please check out one of my many lore videos, literally for FleshEAter Courts, because I think out of all my army reviews and stuff, FleshEAter Courts is what I've spent the most time on, so there's all that there. I just wanted to give you guys a brief summary. So, with that aside, let us talk about more specifically the lore for the Blisterskin. So the Blisterskin is the Grand Court, or I should say one of the Grand Courts that we're aware of, from the realm of Ashi, or realm of fire, however it is pronounced. So the idea of these guys is essentially, who were they before they turned into the cannibals they are now, as that really does build a lot of what the history and the background is for a Grand Court. And then the Blisterskin originally were essentially a kingdom that had quite deep religious beliefs, as in Age of Sigmar, a lot of religious beliefs, and there's so many of them, what makes them quite interesting. And in this particular case, this religious kingdom believed and worshipped the sun. So the sun in Age of Sigmar is not obviously as simple as the sun in our solar system, but the sun from Haish essentially worshipped the light that came from Haish, and even that it burned all the ground around them in the kingdoms and everything else, they still worshipped this bright light from Haish, because they really believed that Haish was the realm of enlightenment, and through this light it shared its enlightenment upon them. So when they worshipped it, what would they do? Because in Ashi, in this particular part, in this kingdom, it was very hard to grow crops and everything else, as you can imagine. It's not particularly the best farmland. So they still sacrificed a third of all their goods they produced, so all their crops and everything else, and put it on top of their highest towers in their kingdoms as a sacrifice to the light. And obviously this light burned up all the crops and everything they left as the sacrifice. So, the sacrifice was taken. And the reason they sacrificed this was so that on their next season, they would have a good harvest. So, it was give to receive, that sort of relationship they had with their deity. And the royal families that ran this cult within this kingdom really lasted for a very long time, and this cult had complete control of this kingdom, and really it was just their culture. It wasn't just like a cult ruling, dictating anything. It was just their culture, and it's what they believed. And it worked for as long as until the Age of Chaos, which is unfortunately the downfall for many of these great and seamlessly impossible to topple kingdoms and empires. And in terms of this kingdom, there was no exceptions, as when the soldiers and warriors and beasts and demons of chaos poured into the realm of fire, they torched all the crops and killed all the livestock and toppled all the great monuments this kingdom had created. And this made all the citizens that survived in this desperate and dark times flee into the wilderness. And as this was very desperate times and they didn't have anything they could sacrifice to their deity, this bright light coming from Haish as they normally do, they then eventually sacrificed either the old, the weak, or the vulnerable to their deity to smite down the dark legions of chaos who had destroyed their homeland. And unfortunately, their deity did not answer, so they had to stay in the wilderness, and eventually some returned to their shattered kingdom. And then this is just by chance, when all hope seemed lost to the survivors of this once great kingdom and their descendants, that they shall receive a visit from abhorrent and ghoul kings. And when they discovered these poor souls, like I've mentioned, the abhorrents and ghoul kings felt sorry for these poor survivors and offered them a way to enlightenment and for them to rebuild their long lost kingdom, which was through blood and madness, eventually leading these descendants of this great kingdom to mutate into monstrous beings commonly seen in FleshEATER Courts. This led to the creation of the Grand Court of the Blisterskin. Now these mutated creatures believe they are rebuilding their kingdom and are also now resistant to the powerful heat of their sun, when in fact actually, because of their mutated beings, they simply blister their skin and are left scarred on the top of their bodies, but they just sheerly don't notice the pain anymore. They also go to seek out any evil from around their once glorious kingdom and to try and help many of their once lost neighbours. But in fact, they just spread fear, horror and death wherever they go, and none can hope to escape them, as many of their mutations have led them to grow leathery wings and become quicker on their feet. Many of the victims of the Blisterskin can only hear in the distance a howling of hungry mouths, knowing that their end is near. After the Blisterskin have finished with their feast and cleansing that particular part of the realm from evil, unlike many other Grand Courts, they do something vastly different. Despite their unending hunger, they deliberately leave a third of all their victims untouched, left there on the ground to bake, burn and roast in the sun, as they still keep their cult tradition of making sure a third of all resources they collect are sacrificed to their deity. And to be honest with you guys, I ended up talking about the lore there longer than I thought I would. But you know what? I'm happy because I think it's such a cool story and it's something I wanted to carry over, and I think it was worth the time it took. I also wanted to say that I think it's really cool with the Blisterskin how, despite all their madness and, you know, their, like I said, their unending hunger, they still keep up their cultural traditions as thinking they're still that great kingdom they once were, by leaving a third of sacrifices to the sun. I think it's really cool, and I think it just, if you look at these guys from a distance and you just think, you know, they're nothing but just crazed cannibals, they still keep up their traditions, which I think is very important. And when FleshEATER Courts, of course, they still have their royal families like they did before the Age of Chaos, and when this great kingdom fell to the axe, blade, sword and claw, to the forces of chaos. But enough about their lore. Let's actually talk about the army. So what I tend to do in my wide plays is I talk, what about the army off table? Because, you know, that's a big part of why you would collect it. Now, to be honest, I would just be repeating my why play FleshEATER Court information in that video, and I really don't think that's necessary in this, as it's just repeating myself. If you want to know why play FleshEATER Courts in terms of like a hobby perspective of collecting, building and painting, please go watch that video, but I'll essentially summarise it for you. So FleshEATER Courts, it's an army that's a small model range, shall we say. You can practically buy the whole army apart from a Vargolf and an Archer region in the start collecting box. But it's quite cool. It allows for quite a lot of customization, as essentially like a Cryptora and a Crypt Flare are exactly the same. Just swap the arms, the wings around, and you can even make heroes that way as well. So it's a very cheap army to get into compared to a lot of the others, which is good. The painting side, you can paint this up beautifully and take incredible amount of time if you would like, but it also is a very forgiving army for if you want to get it painted up quickly to a nice tabletop standard, which is very nice by using things like washes or now contrast and dry brush and things like that, and plenty of blood for the blood god, of course. What I will say though about specifically when it comes to Blisterskin, I think it's a really cool colour scheme. Like I said, I do tend to run my guys a fair bit at the time as Blisterskin, and it's not painted like that because all my FleshEATER Court stuff's painted before this Battle Tome came out. But I think it's a really cool colour scheme. Consider it all just being like, all just black, all just white or something for their skin. You've got one base tone, and then you've got the blistered skin, which you could have loads of fun with on their backs. And for a lot of the models, particularly the Crypt Horrors and the Crypt Flares, the model really allows that sort of like blistered, scarred look to them. As you know, you've got exposed spine, and you've got all the pupils and spots and all the things in the back, so you can paint up very nicely. So yeah, I think it's quite a nice colour scheme, and it also allows for quite a nice basing as well for the Realm of Fire, which you can take to your heart's content, or you could even base your model so you can try and have and sort of like, if I'm thinking about how I base my Flesh Eater Courts, I've got a lot of decapitated stormcasts and things like that, but you could have sort of, like arms or bodies and stuff that they've been eaten. But what makes them different is that you kind of have ones that aren't just covered in, blood of the blood god and that they've been eating them and all that sort of thing. Have them just burnt and blackened from the sun, and you could really play on that theme you've got from the story. So I think that's really more than enough to say about why collect them off the table reasons and strengths and stuff. Because like I said, I'll just be repeating what I've said in my why play Flesh Eater Court video, but you guys of course can let me know that in the comments. So then, talking about on the table, what do we like about them? So as it is a Grand Court, what that means is it's a sub-allegiance. So you won't be able to choose any generic command traits or artifacts for your Flesh Eater Courts in this army. You're locked into the 2 you get here. Of course, if you take a battalion, you'll be able to take additional artifact, obviously. But the same with most sub-allegiances, you're locked into those command traits and those artifacts. But to be honest, I quite like the ones you get here. So talking about the rules, essentially your main ability you're going to get just flat out throughout the army is going to be the blistering speed. So the armies of the Blisterskin Grand Court advance at a terrifying pace. Add 2 to the move characteristics of Blisterskin units. I really like this because it goes from making things that are an alright speed, like even just Crypt Ghouls, for example, that have got a movement of 6, right? Now the movement 8. It makes your Crypt Horrors normally movement 7, now the movement 9, which makes them cavalry kind of speed at that point. It then makes your Crypt Flayers, which I am a big fan of, especially taking in the Grand Court of the Blisterskin. Still movement 12, they're now movement 14. Your Terror Guys, a very popular model in the Flesh Eater Courts, no doubt, is now movement 16 instead of movement 14. And I know if you're talking about Terror Guys, it wouldn't take a lot of Terror Guys, go Gristlegore and stuff. I, perfectly honestly, couldn't give 2 shits about Gristlegore. It was just far too popular for me to be interested in taking it, so I turned to Blisterskin. So, don't really know much about Gristlegore, but it's not very cool as it's too popular in my honest opinion. But enough about that. So, add 2 to the move characteristic is huge. As if you watched any of my videos, I probably have mentioned that Age of Sigmar is a movement game, and that is how you win the game, because movement gets you to those objectives and gets you those victory points, and i.e. lets you win the game. You can be tabled in Age of Sigmar, but if you've got more victory points than your opponent at the end of the game, it doesn't matter. So yeah, movement is really, really good, particularly in an army where you can really buff its movement. I've done turn 1 Alpha Strike charges with Crypt Flares as an example, or with Terrorgeist, because you've got ways to make them be able to run in charge, and then you've got ways like here to add 2 to their movement, and then you've got other ways, particularly with Crypt Flares, to make them like an extra +4 movement. So you can really go to town on their movement, and you could just capitalise it in this Blisterskin Grand Court, which I really, really do like. And may take the enemy by surprise. Not that you want to go like, I got you sort of moment, but just by how fast this army can be, you can make an Alpha Strike army, which I really think is quite cool and different. So the next thing to talk about is going to be the Commandability. So, Lords of the Burning Skies. The Winged Warriors of the Blisterskin Grand Court take to the skies in order to encircle their foes. You can use this command ability at the start of your movement phase. If you do so, pick one friendly Blisterskin unit that can fly and which is wholly within 12 inches, or a friendly Blisterskin hero, or wholly within 18 inches, or a friendly Blisterskin hero that is a general. Remove that unit from the battlefield and set it up again anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches from any enemy unit. It may not move later in that movement phase. Okay, so of course you can't use it for things like Crypt Ghouls, Crypt Horrors, because they can't fly, i.e. we can see more of a Flare list building for this Grand Court, and Terror Guys as well, of course, and Zombie Dragons and everything else that can fly. But this means that you have a teleport ability in your army. Very good. I've already said your army's fast, but being a fast army compared to an army that can teleport, and I know you have to spend a command point to that teleport, but I think that's good. Because a lot of teleporting is probably done via spells in Age of Sigmar, which, unless you've got a certain really high magic build, you're not guaranteed to get off, right? So a command ability, yeah, it's going to cost you a CP, a command point, but you've got to just spend a command point, yeah? You're not trying to cast a spell, even if you get the spell and then the enemy unbinds it. So you've got more reliability here, and that's why I prefer it being a command ability than a spell. And it's really good having that teleport spell. Of course, you know, taking a enemy objective that's undefended or that sort of thing, or just if you need to get all the way across the board with a big nasty unit, you can do. So yeah, I do like that. And obviously it can make a general teleport. So for example, you can use command at the start of your movement phase. If you do so, pick one friendly Blisterskin unit that can fly and switches within 12 inches of a friendly Blisterskin hero, or wholly within 8 inches of a friendly Blisterskin hero that is a general. Remove that unit and set it up again 9 inches away from the enemy and around the battlefield. So I was just reading that just to double check. But what that means is that if you've got a FleshEATer Court Abhorrent Ghoul King on a Terrorgeist, then that means you can teleport him out of combat. Let's say he's stuck in combat. He doesn't want to be in no combat for some reason because he's a beast in combat, but let's just say he's going to die. You can fly him out there, which is quite cool because you've just teleported him. So I like that. You can use it, obviously. A hero can use this command ability on himself, so it's good is what I'm trying to say. Right, okay, and then you've got the command trait. So, a Blisterskin general must have this command trait instead of one listed on page 56, which is the page in the battle tome. So this is Hellish Orator. So the subjects of the Blisterskin Grand Court blindly follow the divine commands of their rulers. So there we go, talking about the lore comes from like the cult aspect. So if this general is on the battlefield at the start of your hero phase, roll a dice. On a 4+, you receive one additional command point, which is great, right? I'm not going to lie, FleshEATer Courts, incredibly hungry, pardon the pun, CP army, right? So because you really want to get off your feeding frenzy all the time, which is your way to always attack twice in a row, essentially, making a Terrorgeist incredibly horrendous. You want CPs to do that, and if you want to do that, let's just say once every battle round even. Or, to be honest, you're going to want to do it at least 2 times every battle round, because you're going to want to do it at least once every turn, yours and your opponent's. That's 2 command points, right? And you only get 1 in your hero phase. So getting an extra one is huge. And I know it's only on a 4+, but you know, that means in your, I don't know, well, your 5 turns in a game, right? 5 battle rounds. So that means the bad average, you've got 2 extra command points out of this command trait, maybe 3. And yeah, obviously it depends on luck, but on a 4+, not too bad. I definitely like it. And then the artifact of power. So the first Blisterskin hero to receive an artifact of power must be given the Eye of Haish. So the Eye of Haish, gouged from the eye socket of a crystal drake. This orb still emits blinding beams of light that fill the mind with visions of horror. Subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made with missile weapons that target a friendly Blisterskin unit wholly within 6 inches of the bearer. Okay, so it really comes down to list building now, right? Because, for example, how I tend to build my Blisterskin list, so how I was you've got a lot of flares and you've got at least 1 Terrorgeist in there. But the cool thing about Blisterskin is that flares become battle line in it, which is a big thing, because then it means that your Equipped Infernal Courtier, your Crit Flare hero, doesn't have to be the general to make your Crit Flares battle line. So that's cool. But what I will say is you don't want to put all of your command traits and all your artifacts, and what I mean by that, I just mean your command trait and probably 1 artifact, unless you are a battalion, on the same guy, because then the enemy are just going to go, oh, that's the one I need to shoot to shit to kill. Okay, so you want to split it up essentially, and that's why I tend to give the artifact of power, the Eye of Haish, to the Abhorrent Ghoul King on Terrorgeist, because then that means that he's -1 to hit in shooting, because he can't benefit from Lookout Sir as he's the monster. And what that means is that he's also got a bigger base, so you're making the most of that whole living 6, so there may be another units benefiting from it as well. Whereas if you were to put that on, let's just say, a Archregent Ghoul King, you're just really making him -1 to hit. There's not really going to... It's not a huge enough range to make something else -1 to hit as well, really, in my honest opinion. The same if you give it to the Crypt Infernal Courtier as well, which obviously you can take, you know, a Crypt Haunter Courtier, you know, the Crypt Horror Hero, etc. But this is really aiming towards your flares, this list, okay? This Grand Court is all about things that fly. So, yeah, that's how I like to do it, split it up. So, now that we know what it is like on the table, what are the weaknesses of this? As everything, if it's got strengths, it's bound to have weaknesses. Okay, so firstly, like I say, you're locked into your command trait and you're locked into your artifacts of power, right? And the command trait I really like. The 4-up additional command point I think is worth it. I think if that was on a list of 6 command traits I could take, it would definitely be one I'd consider. The artifact, subtract 1 from hit rolls from shooting, is maybe I wouldn't take that. Maybe there would be a better one. And in the list that we have in the Battle Zone for FleshEATER Courts, there are better artifacts I would rather take over it. But it's not terrible. You know, it's not like one of these things where it's like, if you're in combat with an enemy hero that also happens to be their general, and also happens to have a command trait and an artifact, and also happens to have 31 wounds, you can then +1 to wound rolls against it. It's not that bad. It's going to be more useful than that really situational artifact of power that there are countless out there. Okay, so that's something I would replace, but you know, it's not the worst. So the other thing you're missing out here, rather than just the generic not being able to choose your command trait and artifact, is that you're also missing out on the delusion for your army. And that is, for me personally, huge in FleshEATER Courts, because like I say, I've run Blisterskin quite a few times. The last few games I've had, well, I say the last few games for a while, is I haven't been taking a Grand Court, to be honest with you, because I think the delusions are very good and are better than taking a Grand Court, in my honest opinion. And when I mean the delusions, I mean one of them, which is Feast Day. And what that means is that you can do Feeding Frenzy once per turn for free. So when I said I was spending at least 2 command points every battle round to be able to do that once in each turn, those 2 command points I was spending, I'm now not. So then that means I can make another unit do Feeding Frenzy if I want to, or I can use it to do my summoning. And as you can go, yeah, but an Archregent or, you know, a Ghoul King, and they're next to the throne, they're going to be doing it anyway. It's like, yes, but I run Terrorgeist and Zombie Dragons with Ghoul Kings on them in my list, so they can't really benefit from that. So it's definitely useful for me in that. So you're missing out on Feast Day, which is a big thing. But what I would say is that's very much depending on how you want to build your list. When you want to go more heavy on flares, I would say Blisterskin Grand Court is good, and I personally would recommend the Dead Watch Battalion, which is a battalion that involves 3 Crypt Flare units, obviously of various sizes. You can choose, you're not locked into what it has to be. And then 1 Crypt Infernal Courtier, which is again the hero for the Crypt Flares. And what that allows you to do is 1 unit from that battalion can partly attack in the hero phase if it is already within range of the enemy in combat. If it's already within 3 inches of the enemy, it can partly attack. It doesn't have to be within range of the hero from that battalion, it can just do it. And also the hero of the battalion can be the unit that's selected to do it. It's my favourite battalion from the FleshEATER Courts, as I've been running it for since FleshEATER Courts ever came out, about, what, 4 years now, probably? So I'm definitely a big fan of it. It's really cheap. Last I checked, 110 points for it in FleshEATER Courts, which is really cheap. You're going to get an extra artifact out of it, and you're going to get the extra command point. So if you take that as well, you can see how you're really stacking these command points now in Blisterskin. And like I say, FleshEATER Courts, command point heavy. It wants to summon, and it wants to do Feeding Frenzy, right? So it's only going to help with that. And then it means that you can now pick an artifact of power. You're not just going to have to use the Eye of Haish, which you get, obviously, with the Blisterskin Grand Court. And the one I go for, I believe it's called the Dermal Robe. I'm pretty sure it's that for my Archregent, to give him +1 to cast and to unbind, to make your spells that you really need to get off in your FleshEATER Court army more guaranteed to get off. So guys, with that, I think that is nicely a good way to end my first Why Play video on a sub-allegiance, of course, in this time being the FleshEATER Courts, one and only Blisterskin Grand Court, which I said I'm a massive fan of. There are obviously positives and weaknesses to taking this, but the great thing of doing these wide plays for a sub-legions is that you're already committed to the army, right? You already probably have the models, already building and painting the models, otherwise you're probably not looking at why would you play a certain sub-legions. So you can, if Blisterskin isn't for you, you can try out one of the other ones, obviously. But I think I've really nailed down some of the strong positives I personally think there are in Blisterskin and why you should play them. Of course, if I've missed anything, if there's anything you disagreed with, or who knows, there may be something you agree with that I've said, please put it down in the comments, as if it's something I've missed, we'll all appreciate being able to know what that thing is, as we're all here to learn, you know? Of course, you know, we all benefit from our shared experiences with the army, I guess. I also want to say, if you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and that subscribe button, and make sure you hit that bell notification if you haven't already, to make sure you don't miss any of my future videos. I plan to do many more wide plays, and now that I've finished all the army wide plays until Games Workshop has released any more armies, that's obviously some point in the future, I will be sticking to the sub-legions ones, and there are loads. There was 25 at the time of this recording main armies for Games Workshop they made for Age of Sigmar, which I did wide plays for. So going from the sub-allegiance, I don't know, roughly guessing it, not every army book has got sub-allegiances, I know, Gloomspite Gits, I hear you, but it's probably going to be, on average, let's say, 4 for each book, which is going to put me probably around somewhere like 90 sub-allegiance wide plays to do, which is going to take a very long time, but I thought that when I started my wide play series for the armies themselves, and we got to the end of that for now, so I'm sure we'll get to the end of these sub-legions videos. If you are enjoying them, like I say, smash that like button, as it really lets me know that this is content you want to see. Of course, like, as anything, if I see that people aren't enjoying things, I won't continue doing it. So I really do appreciate you guys letting me know that by smashing that like button. And also, if you found this video helpful and useful, make sure you share it, as it helps other people as well. And like I said many times, guys, that's why I do these videos, to try and help as many people with Age of Sigmar as possible. And with that, I'd also like to do a massive shout out to my Patreons. So of course, like I said before, we've got Morgasts, which is Sandback. We've got my Vampires, which is Mir, Martin S, Rouse321, Max T, David A, and my Necromancers, which is Jacq.l, RadiationRiley, AW77, Dice Sagas, and WolfNick. Guys, obviously the different tiers here show different levels of support, but they all really do help to, well, I say they help, but there wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be able to do this channel. So massive shout out to you. Thank you for all your continued support. Stay absolutely awesome. And what I would also like to say is, if anyone would consider becoming a Patreon, there will be a link to it at the top of the description down below. Even if you just give $1 a month, it goes towards me being able to keep this up and make these videos that you enjoy. So if you want to check that out, I'd be hugely appreciative. So guys, until next time, like I said, comment any questions you may have down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Remember, until next time, to stay safe, stay hygienic, wear a mask, wash your hands for God's sake, and then that means we'll all be gaming again soon in real life, hopefully at some point going into 2021. But of course, remember, until next time, more importantly, that Nagash is all, and all is one in Nagash.